Hello and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom. This is Torrin Walker, and today I have a brother with me who decided to join me, who's a community organizer. He's very well known for grassroots organizing in the city. He is part of a group called Community Movement Builders, so we're going to talk about that a little bit and what they mean for Atlanta, the local community, and the country, hopefully. So this is Kamau Franklin. Kamau, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, brother. How you feeling? Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me. For people who don't know, can you talk a little bit about the background of community movement builders and what you're trying to achieve with the initiatives?
We are a grassroots organization. We have chapters actually in 6 cities, Atlanta, Memphis, New Orleans, Dallas, San Diego, and Detroit. And we consider our work to be grassroots organizing, in particular in Atlanta, which is sort of our flagship, I would say, chapter at this particular stage. We do organizing around gentrification, anti-gentrification work in Southwest Atlanta, and we also do work around the issue of police brutality. And then on the other side, we also do what we call sustainability work, which is organizing to create cooperative development, microeconomic enterprises, so that we can bring some stability on the economic level, which is an alternative to some capitalist development in our community. And really quickly, we have a aquaponics cooperative, a CMOS cooperative, a security cooperative, and we're also working on a kale chip cooperative as well. So those are the sort of the mainstays of our work. We also do some community stabilization funding for folks, some mutual aid support for folks also. And one program I like to highlight that we're working on right now is a cop watch and safety patrol that we're doing in the community in Southwest Atlanta, because again, we feel that we can't trust the police to do any kind of policing in our neighborhood. And so we must take control of any sort of policing or safety apparatus. And this is our way of focusing in on that and trying to sort of change the conversation, not only from, not just to be about defunding the police, but to be about the control of any sort of security, safety, and policing mechanism in the Black community.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. The Cop Watch Initiative, is that more of a situation where it was like in the back in the day with the Panthers, where you would watch the police as they were going about their duties and making sure that they were being by the book as far as what they were supposed to do, or how does it work in the city?
Yeah. So for us, it's a security, I guess, a safety security slash police cop watch. So yes, one element of that is to watch the police as they stop people in the neighborhood, in the community, and make sure that folks' rights are not being violated, to also be able to record what's happening, to make sure that we have some evidence later on if there is some abuse that's taking place. And part two of that is to act as a safety apparatus within our community. So we're just starting this a couple of months ago, but to make sure that if there is any incidents that we can help prevent that's happening on the block, if we can sort of step in and support people and make sure we can de-escalate things, we do that. We also pass out know your rights information so that folks can know what their rights are when they are stopped by the police. And our hope is to grow this program into something that's truly thought of as an alternative to what policing looks like in our community. We're not, we actually decided not to carry open carry in this particular instance. We've decided to be sort of a force that talks with people, that communicates with people, that tries to get folks on our side to understand the politics behind why we're doing what we are, and what the future holds for policing is not going to be a business as usual, in a sense of a top-down militarized apparatus is not going to be truly reformed. We need to create alternatives to how the police operate in our community if we want to stop the murders, harassment, abuse, and assault, and over-policing and arrest that happens in our community.
Okay. Have you been able to like defuse certain situations before any official quote unquote police get called? Like, has there been situations where things are starting to escalate on the block and you've been able to come in and kind of like de-escalate and get everybody kind of chill and have different alternatives to conflict resolution?
Yeah, we've had a couple of incidents already where we've been able to sort of step in and talk to folks, have folks walk away, just try to just chill the situation out. And I think again, that's our main function at this particular point in time, is to make sure that before something escalates into someone on the block calling 911 or the cops whizzing by and they see something, or them just stopping and harassing folks, is to be a presence. We wear sort of a t-shirt uniform, so that we can demonstrate that there's alternative ways to bring security and safety to our neighborhood and our community.
Okay. All right, I want to talk a little bit more about some of your other initiatives. I'm aware of the community garden that you guys have in Pittsburgh and everything. How did that idea come about?
Well, we purchased a house about 4 or 5 years ago in the Pittsburgh neighborhood. We had a donor, and we had some young folks who were from the community, and they actually found the house. And the house was next to a community garden that was, to be nice about it, was in disrepair. So it hadn't been used for a number of years. You had weeds that were like 7 feet high, literally, garden snakes, and all that kind of thing. So we cleaned it up and cleared it out. And then we decided to, put it back into operation and use. And since that time, we used the garden to supplement food giveaways. We've used it to supplement our farmers market that we have. And we've started to use some of the kale that we grow to use for our kale chip cooperative that we're starting. So not only have we done trainings for folks on sort of growing sustainability, but we use the garden in various ways. Our first initial aquaponics system is built in the backyard right next to the garden. So we see it as a way to get the community to get more involved in not only taking care of the garden, but understanding who we are, understanding the importance of food sustainability and fighting against a food desert. So we use it in various ways of that sort. And so it took us a little while to get it operational. We went through a couple of master gardeners. We finally got a brother who was stuck. And so we think right now we're sort of at the height of our usage of the garden in terms of growing produce and getting it distributed to the larger community.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about food insecurity and food deserts in Black communities. How important is that an issue to tackle for the Black community at large?
I think it's extremely important because it interfaces with so many other things that are happening in our community. For instance, something that people don't think about in terms of a food desert, the brother Rashad Brooks was killed at a Wendy's in Southwest Atlanta, right? A fast food restaurant that serves cheap, bad food that's not healthy for us, but becomes the alternative to having healthy solutions. And so it becomes a gathering spot, right? So that's something that people don't really think about when they think about sustainable food choices. But that's part of it. It's the lack thereof of good, healthy food that gives us an opportunity to eat right, be healthy, grow mentally, as opposed to what folks do, which is to throw fast food stuff into our neighborhood, corner stores that don't necessarily, even if they want to, but don't necessarily sell fruits and vegetables at a level which is good for our community. And then the alternative becomes to get some big box store into our neighborhoods, which sells produce, but then sells them at a higher price, and also begins the process of gentrification. So unless we kind of, let's say, thread the needle when we come to sustainability, either we wind up with something that's completely bad, that we have no control over, that does no good for our community, or people impose solutions on our neighborhoods that talk about greening and what's good for us, but it actually leads to a disempowerment and the losing of our community. So a food desert goes way beyond just thinking about individual health issues, which are extremely important, but in a lot of ways, it talks about what's the future and the growth for a neighborhood and who gets to control that future.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you just mentioned about how people impose ideas on the communities. Has the community garden and what's grown around the community garden made people in the neighborhoods a little bit more aware of how important it is to take control of, the rebuilding of a neighborhood or the regrowth of a neighborhood instead of having something brought in and imposed that doesn't really take the residents into consideration?
We think so. I mean, we think, it's one step in a longer battle, but we definitely have gotten more community support, folks who have come to the garden. We've actually just recently, with an organization called Free Fridge, installed a refrigerator in the back of the garden that has fresh produce. We'll have refrigerated goods that people can just come and take. So the idea that we are helping to sustain our community, think about healthy alternatives in foods, we hope builds trust with folks. In addition, again, to the work that we do around safety patrols, into the work that we do that's an anti-gentrification campaign, going around getting petitions, yard signs to say that we need to do everything that we can to keep this neighborhood stabilized, working class, and that's not going to happen unless we are able to sort of create model programs and institutions that people can be a part of enjoying.
And have you seen in the different cities that community movement builders is located, have you seen more of local people and residents be more proactive in fighting gentrification and taking back neighborhoods for themselves instead of having something imposed on them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a larger movement that's going around the country when it comes to Black and brown neighborhoods and what's being imposed as development and what's the outcome of that development, right? And the outcome from New York City to Oakland to places in Chicago to here in Atlanta has been that city management, city mayors, and city councils have decided to team up with developers, and they are deciding to basically replace working class people and poor people and Black people and brown people and bring in higher income, mostly white residents, bring in box stores, bring in specialty stores, coffee shops, and so forth. Use the ideology of building something green to actually move people out of their neighborhoods. There's no other way to say it except basically a sense of ethnic cleansing, moving poor people out of their neighborhoods, Black people out of their neighborhoods, and replacing them with whiter, higher income folks. And this has now become the motto, the solution for poverty, as opposed to solving issues and diving deeply into what it takes to provide the necessary resources to stabilize individuals and communities. What these cities have done with their developer friends is decided to move in, take these communities over, and move these residents out.
Okay, I want to bring that specifically to Atlanta because we all know Atlanta likes to market itself as the city too busy to hate and the home of the civil rights movement. What sort of effects have you what have you seen as far as like that process you just described take place in Atlanta with a city with Black leadership and Black mayor?
Well, I think Atlanta has shown itself to be at the forefront of gentrification. And it's obvious that in Atlanta, with a Black mayor and Black city council that's been in charge for the last 40 to 50 years, that they've teamed up with a white development elite and have moved this city from being something else that people like to say a Black Mecca, if it ever was, to basically a almost majority white city, which has pushed out again Black working class and poor residents in exchange for bringing in higher income whites. And we've seen that since the Olympics. We've seen that through the pain of poor people to move out the city permanently. We've seen that through the destruction of public housing. We've seen that through the Beltline project, which has basically been a gentrifier multiplier. And so that shows us that unless the leadership has an ideology that's working towards or for Black people, it doesn't matter what their race is, because in the end, what they're really doing is paving the way for white developers to take control of the city.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about health. We're in the middle of a pandemic. COVID has had a devastating effect on poor Black communities. How important is, let me go back and rephrase that. You mentioned a little bit about the health, with the things you're doing with CMOS and stuff, that sort of stuff. Have you had a lot of response from people who are looking for alternative ways to take care of themselves during this?
Yeah, what we did early in the pandemic, I think like a lot of organizations, businesses or whatever, we were sort of shut down from our regular activities. And then we decided through our membership, because of where we were located, the options of people in the community to get to work, lack of public transportation, even lack of private transportation in terms of cars, but people being forced to stay home in order to social distance, that we moved from a model that we were working on to one in which we provided mutual aid. So our mutual aid program and packages included providing free food and groceries, and providing free toiletries to people in the neighborhood. So we set up a system not only online, but we walked around and canvassed again in a safe social distancing way, in which we let folks know that if they needed support, they could come to us. And the response from the neighborhood has been overwhelming. So we've had to do additional fundraising, we've gotten additional grants and so forth to make sure that we can get these food boxes and deliveries to people so that they can remain as healthy as possible in the situation as this COVID virus sort of plays on. People think that we're now entering sort of a second wave of COVID, particularly as we get to the winter months, and as the government has found no solutions whatsoever. So we know that it's imperative that during this time period, that not only do we try to continue with some of our regular activities, but we meet the needs of the people where they are. And first and foremost, that's been mutual aid to make sure that people can have healthy food, have toiletries, and continue to try to live their lives.
Okay. What do you see as the future of self-sustaining communities?
I think the only future for our communities is to be self-sustaining, because if we're not, we're going to continually lose our communities to forces that have more resources, who team up with local governments to take those resources from us. And unless we have control, which means control over property in our neighborhoods, control over commercial establishments in our neighborhood, real control over local governments, and that includes city council folks that we run, as opposed to people coming to us and telling us that they're going to support us, we need to let them know ahead of time, or we need to produce our own grassroots leadership that gets to run for these offices. Because if we're not self-sustaining, we're going to be relying on other people for food, clothing, education, and we've been on that road for the last 300 or 400 years. That just doesn't work out in terms of keeping a community healthy and strong.
Okay. Last question. What are the future plans for the Community Movement Builders organization?
Well, we are trying to expand and trying to be a national organization with a national platform, and even an international organization. And so, we continue to grow in terms of chapters. I said we had 6 at the beginning. We are looking to establish a 7th, 8th, and 9th chapter, one on the West Coast, one in the Midwest, one in the East Coast. And so we're looking to grow as much as we can, to have a true radical ideology that sort of goes back to some of the radical ideologies that we think were right in the 60s and 70s. The ideas of Malcolm, the Panthers, the ideas that people like Marcus Garvey brought to us, Ida B. Wells. We think these are folks that had it right and were destroyed by the government. And these are the folks that we want to bring back, these kind of ideologies. We do some civic engagement work, we do some voting work, but we think before we get too heavily involved in trying to think about who is the best of the bad choices, we need to establish some resources, some sustainability, and some control and some organization, so that we can reach out and use the vote as a strategy and a tactic, as opposed to a final income that's, again, imposed on us, that we have to choose the lesser of two evils, and that's the only choices that we have in the world. I think we have a greater choice to make, which is how do we save our community internally, and then we worry about whether or not we're going to be involved in someone else's political system to the degree that they want us involved.
All right, Kamau Franklin, Community Movement Builders. Thank you so much for your time, brother.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you.
All right.